Gemara's Shvat. We are up to the Tzadik Amid Aleph. We had an argument between Rab Nosson and the Chachamim if a husband can annul a neder of his wife, that she said it today, but she said it won't take effect till a while later. Do you look at the time? Do you look at it as the time when she made the neder, or the time when it comes into effect? And and then we had an argument between Rava, or between the where Rava's understanding of Achavar Rav Huna and Rav Papi, that if this argument also applies to an ordinary nedarim, that you go to 3 people to be mata neder, do we say the same thing? That the same argument will apply whether you look at the time when the neder was said. Can you annul a neder that has not come into effect yet? And according to Rav Nosson, you would not be able to, and according to Chachamim, you would be able to. Then came along Rav Papi, and Rav Papi said, no, there's a difference between hafara and because we explained that they argue in that pasuk in the different sukkim there, versus an ordinary heter. When it comes to an ordinary heter, you cannot annul it until it actually comes to effect, because it says lo yachel devar. You emphasize the word yachel. Only when it's chal can you go ahead and to annul it. So Gemara is going to try to bring 2 proofs to support Rav Papi. Lema Misayele. I can bring a proof to Rav Papi. It says Koinim she'eni nenil. A person made 2 vows. Vow number 1, Koinim she'eni nenil. Number 1 is I don't have anything to do with that person. Number 1. Number 2, the plenty a lot of times means from the person. Any nene, I will not have hana. From, even though it says li, it means that person won't give me any hana. Ooh, and second thing is ulamisha eshelov. If I go to somebody, 3 people or yachid mumche, and I say, please annul my neder, if that person does it, then that person becomes asur to me. That's neder number 2. Nishal al harishan. So first, it seems in the Braise, it says clearly, you go and you know the first neder, and then the achar nishal hasheni. And why can't you reverse the order? Because the second neder does not take effect until you actually are shoyel. So you cannot yet, you cannot undo the second neder when you haven't been shoyel yet. So therefore, you have to first go to the first neder. As soon as the first neder goes in, that's a trigger that makes the second neder come into effect, and then you can be shoyel. So it's clear when it comes to hataras nedarim, you cannot go and try to annul the neder until it actually takes effect. Yeah, but if you can tell me you can tell me that you have the same argument that you can be you can go ahead according to Chachamim and be shoyel even though the neder has not come into effect. Then he can annul either neder first. Well, that's a proof. All the Bryce is telling you here is that you do one neder at a time. Does it tell you which is the first, which is the second? It just tells you do one neder first and another neder second. But maybe the second neder you can do first and the first neder you do second. It doesn't tell you the first neder is the one you should know first. Do we know from the Bryce which one you're doing first or second? All the Bryce is saying is you cannot know both of them at the same time. You have to do one first and one second. One, not the first. One first, one second. So there's no support from this brisa. However, the next brisa we're going to bring clearly says there's an order here. The following brisa says, "Koinim she'ein none of the I want that I won't have any benefit from that person. Anything from that person that becomes like carbon. Hareini nazir, I will be a nazir likashe eshel olav." Then they say, but if I will go and be shoyel on my neder, if I go, I will become a nazir. So it says there in the Braise, nishal al nidroi v'achar nishal nidroi. Clearly says, first you go, there's an order here. First you go ahead and you know the neder, and then go deal with the second part about becoming a nazir. So clearly from here you see, that you cannot be annulling a neder, Kozman, it didn't yet take force. Exactly. In other words, it seems a right to a puppy that when it comes to nedarim, everyone, because no argument says that everyone agrees that you have to wait till the neder takes effect. If you can tell me nishal, if you can tell me that you can be shoyel even before the neder takes effect. You can do. Then you should choose. Why is it right to dafka this particular way? No raya. No raya that this is a puppy. Maybe there's still an argument between the Rabban and Rav Nosson, and according to Rav Nosson, Yitaka cannot Rabban holds mefedish, the same thing that they hold by Hafara and Nedarim. Hold over here, you can shoyel before it takes effect. As soon as it said, Rab Nosson argues in both cases, and the author of the Bryce is not everybody, but Rab Nosson doesn't support necessarily the puppy. Amar Ravina. Okay, so therefore, what do we have right now? Either there's a machlekes, still or not, but the halach is like a puppy. The halach is like a puppy. That what you could make that you cannot. What do you call it? That everyone holds, and you cannot. What do you call it? Be made for another now that didn't happen yet. So the Gemara. Sorry, that you could. That when it comes to hafar of the Baal, you could. Allah, if it comes to hafar of the Baal, we pass the Chachamim that you could be made for before it actually happens. When it comes to Hataras and Darim, like our puppy, then everyone agrees you cannot be made for before it actually takes effect because it's la yachal dvarei. We actually had an argument yesterday between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel, right? About if she made a neder while she was married, whether you can undo it for later. We had yesterday. She made she said when I will get married, or she says when I will be divorced, this neder comes into effect. And Rabbi Shmuel says that that you would go when we look at a time when it comes. So if she said it when she was single, and then when I get married, I want to become whatever. The husband can be made because he says we look at the time it takes effect, and the Rabbi Akiva says no, you cannot be made because look at the time it was said. So clearly, Rabbi Akiva also agrees with the Chachamim when it comes to Hafara that we look at the time that it's said. But when it comes to Hataras Nadarim, it's only when it takes effect. Okay, says the Gemara. There's, however, a third opinion. Amar Marema told me, Amar Avuch, this is what your father said. Mashmei a puppy in the name of a puppy. We said what a puppy holds. That everyone agrees when it comes to Hataras Nadarim that you have to wait till it takes effect. They hold from this very same possible Yachal Dvara. The first version is your accent is on the Yachal. The second version is that the emphasis is Devarai, it's merely words. And that's the moment that counts, when it's said. Berema said to Ravina, your father. Yeah. Yeah. The machlek is the whole machlek is about father. Avol b'shayla, when it comes to actual, when it comes to an ordinary case of Hataras Nadarim, Divrei Hakol, everyone holds that made for, yes, you can be made for as soon as it's said. You look at the words Devarai. Remember to say the Lahavi b'maisa. I'm also showing what does this line mean? Remember, no, it's as long even as in the realm of talking, it did not take any force. There's no mice involved there. Do not breach your words, but other people can annul your words. As long once you put it in the world of words, it can be annulled. That's this version of puppy. Others say the Lahada b'mais, as Rashi actually says, that this whole story of Acha Yaakov, the story we had yesterday about this person who said, I'm going to answer all the Hanos in the world if I get married before I sit and learn for a few years in the yeshiva. And then he went ahead and he tricked him to go get married so they can bring into effect the neder, because he didn't ask yet the whole world, so that we can annul it. If we learn now that in the regular Nedarim, words is enough to annul, then we didn't need that whole Maisa of Rav Acha. Not the right, he got wrong. No. He said to him, don't worry that you're not breaching your neder, you don't have to worry about your neder. So the guy said, okay, I'll get married then, because he got involved in other work, or he just never got around to sitting properly. Says the Gemara, now the two proofs that we brought before, we can use now as this proofs. So anyway, Michael asked a question. You're telling me that it comes to Hataras. Everyone agrees. As soon as it was said, you can annul it. Tell me the Braisa. I don't have any hana from that person. And this person I will ask to be sure that neder. I'm also going to ask that person having hana for me. First you go to the first, then you go to the second. According to you, everyone agrees. Everyone agrees that as soon as the words are said, you can already annul it. Then why do you have to do the first ned, the first, and the second ned, the second, as if the second ned it hasn't yet come to the fore? Who cares? Amai, you go to either one. So we'll answer the same thing before. No question. Who told you the Braisa says the number one is the first, number two is the second? Right? All the Braisa is saying is you can only ask, you can only be shoyal one thing at a time. Whichever one you want is your first. So A1 and then second, not the first before and the second before.
Language seems to imply the first.
Yeah, but you can't bring a proof. To bring a proof has to be compelling. No proof. But the second proof that we brought as a proof, even though as a proof it wasn't strong, but as a question it will be, a repudiation definitely will be. Mason in the second place it clearly spells out that you have to wait for the nazir until later on. And according to you, there's no opinion that says that you have to wait later on. According to you, everyone agreed about Tarzan Dodim as soon as it said you can annul it. And then who's also the right? May say Kainim Shane and but he knows it. He said Kainim Shane for another. And second thing is how do you know become a nazir? Allah, if I go and ask somebody to matter, Nishal needs a back Nishal needs you go first to Ned and then the next. But according to you, that makes no difference. You say that as soon as you make the net, you can annul it. That is now a tiyuf because there is no according to Rapapi, the second version. Everyone agrees. As soon as the net is said, you can annul it. So obviously, he's not talking about it. Mishnah. Okay. This Mishnah, we're going to talk about the wife of a Kohen. A Kohen different than by Yisrael. By Yisrael, if a woman, Chas v'shalom, was raped or something, she's not forbidden to her husband at all. It's only if she deliberately, committed adultery, then she's forbidden to her husband. But not if she was raped. Saying by a Kohen, Aisha's Kohen, even if it's not a fault, she can no longer live with a Kohen. In fact, if Aisha is told she's raped, even though she can live with her husband, but if her husband, let's say, dies, she cannot marry a Kohen in the future because she was in a situation of her Kohen itself, it's us. We'll call her Zaina as far as a Kohen is concerned. So now the question is, if a woman comes forward and says, I was raped, goes to her husband, we have no witnesses, or a lone witness, which doesn't do anything, because she comes along and says to her husband, I was raped. What happens? Does the husband have to divorce her or not? So the Mishnah tells us there was a time that, interesting Mishnah, body strength in the early days, when there was integrity. They would say, that 3 different cases of women that we trusted them implicitly, and yaitzes, and they have to leave the husband because we trust them. When we trust them that they're telling the truth and they're just trying to get out of the way out of a marriage because they fell in love with somebody else, but they're telling us the truth. And in all these 3 cases, it's not their fault, so therefore they're entitled to ksuba. Because if a woman commits adultery, let's say by Yisrael, and she has to get divorced, she forfeits ksuba because it's her fault. But over here, if she was raped, then she's entitled to her ksuba. Number 1, she says, "Temeya ani loch." Number 1 is she says that I became tamei to you. In other words, somebody is a kohen, and somebody. And how do we know it's about a kohen? We'll soon see, because she says if we're talking about, she's saying deliberately I was tamei. We're talking about Yisrael, because to Yisrael, if it's man you love, is not a problem. I don't care back then or today. If she was raped, she's mutter to her husband. So obviously, if it's Yisrael, it's on a voluntary basis. If it's a voluntary basis, then she does forfeit a ksuba. Why does the Mishnah say noitlus ksuba? The only time she takes a ksuba is that she was coerced. And if she was coerced, why would she be usher to the husband? It's only talking about a kohen. So number 1 is she said Tmanulach, I'm a kohen. Case number 2 is Shamayim beini lebeincha, which is a problem that only heaven knows. She says that he doesn't know how to have intimate relations, and therefore she'll never be able to have a child. And she wants to have a child, not so much because of the mitzvah, but she wants someone to take care of her when she becomes older. And so therefore, the expression is she wants someone that has a shovel that can dig her a grave. But in other words, to be taken care of by her children when she gets older. It's a bit morbid. They used to call a young child my kaddish. Yeah. What's that all about? I have only one son. That would say exactly. It's my kaddish. That's how they used to call the kid. Okay.
Yeah, but it shows you something about life in those times.
Exactly. So Shemaim, heaven knows that it's not working out. The Yerushalmi, according to somebody, Yerushalmi actually is arguing, Shemaim means the distance. We've grown apart. The distance between me and my husband is like heaven and earth. There's no correlation between the two, and that's how we are. In other words, we're not talking about anything happened here, just saying that we just grew apart.
Our relationship broke down.
Yeah, broke down. And lav dafka that there's any antipathy or hostility here, is just that we have nothing to do with each other. The third one is she says, I don't want to have any intimate relations with anybody. In this case, she's including a husband. And the Gemara says the fact that she is saying that I don't have intimate relations with anybody is showing us that she must have some kind of issue that maybe it's painful or something that she can't have tashmish. It's not like she hates this person, doesn't want to have tashmish from this person, then we don't believe her. But it's because she can't. Yeah, so medical.
It actually gives a different chapter together to Shemayim. He says the husband is not Mazriya.
I just said that.
Oh,
can't have intimate relations.
Okay.
You
I thought you were saying Mitzidah, but she has an issue.
No, that's the third. That's case number 3. You're talking about case number 2. Case number 2 is Shemayim being only the heaven knows what's happening, and therefore she's saying that we cannot procreate. You cannot have a relation properly. Case number 3 is the Tulanim and Yehudim. I don't have any relation with anybody because she has some kind of a condition that is painful and she can't have any touch. Okay, that's how it used to be. Trust her implicitly, told the husband, even though the Torah says that we don't force the husband to give again, it's up to the husband. In these cases, we tell the husband you have to give again. Later on in life, they realized, no. What was happening was that women used to use this as a ruse to get out of a marriage they weren't happy with, or they found somebody else they fell in love with. So therefore, they would say to the husband, "Oh, Shme'anilach," or "Shemayim." Stop trusting her. We don't want. We are more worried now that the whole institution of marriage will become weakened because it's so easy to get out of a marriage. And today, 50% of marriages end up in divorce. So we didn't want that to happen. So we made the marriage, unfortunately, sometimes it comes at a cost because sometimes the women are telling the truth and so on. And we'll see in a second what we do. So, but the Chachamim decided that the institution of marriage is something that's worth more to save than certain individual casualties, let's call them casualties, that fall through the net. So what do you do? I met if she says this would happen, let her bring a proof to her words. Now this din is causing a lot of problems. First of all, we have a concept called shavya anafshe chaticha desur. A person can say that I am usher. She can say this piece of meat is usher. Nobody can force her to eat it because she says usher. If she says I am usher to my husband, how can you force it to live? We'll have a shavya anafshe chaticha desur. What happened to that? So the Ran gives 3 answers. One is that the Ran says that, first of all, what is Shavi Nafshech Chasir? Why do you believe her? There's a big, beautiful tzas from Lamadalad, similar to Lamadalad and others, either because it's like a neder. Not that we believe her. It's like she's taking upon herself a neder, that this is also from now on. So if she asks us something, how can you be mad to her? So she is, that's Shavi Nafshech Chasir. Or Shavi Nafshech Chasir is Ne'emonis. We actually believe her. She's saying it, she's hurting herself because she's saying it's also to me. So we believe her, it's Ne'emonis. So it's either neder or nemanis, or she is being machshel others. The reason why Shav Nachar is because it's like this naiva. How can you have her dealing with somebody else and then you have to deal? So why are we worried over here? What do you mean the Chachamim decided? But why are we worried? So one opinion is that the Rabbanon have the right to take out of the Torah, right? Like we say, we don't blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah, we don't bench lulav on Shabbos and Sukkot. The Chachamim have the right to be oikin the Torah. It's only a shevel taisa, and here's the Kumar said, like, live with him, but she can't. She said she's raped. It has to live with her husband like Kohen. So we say lemigdam milsa you're allowed to. Now some of the Shainim say that you're allowed to even a Kumar say if we are doing it in order to protect something, protecting marriage. We're protecting the institution of marriage. That's what we're doing here. And therefore, even the Kumah say that Chachamim go against the Torah, which is a big chiddush. The Ran says, no, we cannot do that. So the big chiddush, you cannot do in a Kumah say that Chachamim should tell you to actively go against the Torah, only for Torah show like Eliyahu and Har Carmel. You're going to do that. Or, like, and once off, not on a permanent basis. So he doesn't like the Pshat at all. But that's what other Rishonim say. And Teishes adds the words, not because of, the Milsa. He just says where there's a compelling logic. Where there's a compelling logic, the Chachamim have the right. Kumva say, we had this in Taf Tzaddik in Yeramus. And then we learned only Shaval Taisa. Comes along to the Rishonim here and say that even a Kumva say you can. Like right here, we allow the woman to live with the husband. The Ran comes up with a brilliant solution, which is what some rabbis say want to start using, which is a dangerous thing, and that is the Chacham came along and said, in order to save the institution of marriage, we're going to say she was never married to the Kohen in the first place. So when she was Mazana, she was a single woman.
How do you move back?
When you get married, you say, came along Moshe Yisrael and said, you know what? In order to protect this marriage and your decision, you were never married. You were living with a Kohen.
You have a document,
but when we're mafkiel and mafreya, the document I had document here, you were never married. We decided that mafreya never married. So therefore, because they were not married, the kid was born out of wedlock. Okay, but she's not a zoyna, therefore she could live with her husband. That's what they did.
Can I just ask?
A lot of Chaim is not happy with this, but yeah.
Do we actually say kedas or do we say kedos?
We say kedas
according to the.
We say kedas Moshe, tradition of Moshe and Yisrael. Kedas would be the end.
No, I mean
the kedas would be tradition.
Dalet Ein Sof or
no, Dalet Sof.
Okay,
Dalet Sof. I thought you meant das or das. It's das, which is tradition of Moshe and Yisrael. Age das lama.
It's totally on Moshe Yisrael.
Yeah, so that's how the Ran and none of the other Shane really like this at all because that's dangerous territory. The more you start all these agunas now, why don't we just go ahead and do? And a couple of Rabbanim try to do them from time to time. Taisus and Hashalech, we'll see him getting said. He asked a question. Let's stop all mamzedim. Every time there's a mamzer, let's go ahead. I'm going to go back and save the world. And he says we don't do things to weaken the institution of marriage and encourage mamzedim. So you have to weigh it up. There's always a cost. The question is, which cost is greater? And that's very. I'm afraid it weakens the whole institution of marriage. So the question is, you have a number of agunas. Big problem. The Chazal sat down and weighed it up and decided that this is important. Yeah, even though unfortunately there are. I mean, you have to do everything you can to save agunas, but. Yeah. What do you call it? So that's what the answer. Anyway, so that's Shavi Nafshe Chaticha Deshura. That's how we get around it. And the third thing is, we just don't believe her. We are so convinced that she's not telling the truth, and we don't believe her. Based on that reason, what happens if the husband generally believes her? If the husband wants to believe her, then the poskim say she's asa to him, even though the Chazal says it says in the Mishnah we don't believe her anymore. But if the husband, she's always telling the truth, and she comes over, and she's guilty, whatever, and she tells the husband, and the husband generally believes her, he has to believe her. And in fact, there's a machlek in poskim that gufa. He has to believe her every single time, or right now he's so convinced that she's telling the truth that he must have also comes along. The Tosfos is an amazing thing, and he says. And other Rishonim say a little bit. So he says, Rabbeinu Gershom made a number of charamim. One of the charamim he made, which is not a famous one, that the husband is not allowed to believe her. In this case, because if you're going to believe her, you're going to break up a marriage. We don't want to break up a marriage. I'll quote you the Tosfos. It's an amazing thing. Tosfos says here. I'll quote you the Tosfos here. If I can find it. Oh, here it is. Tosfos says in the 6 lines in the narrow, in the 5 lines in the wide lines. He says here. The last, Yesh Oymin, I'm just quoting the Tosfos. 4 lines in the wide lines end. The Mishamtinale will put the husband in Cherem if he says, I believe my wife. This husband's a kohen. And she says that I was raped. And he generally believes everything she says, and especially he sees how genuine she is. And if he believes her, then I'll live together. The Avodah say, the Mishamtinale, we will put him in excommunication. Al Shegoram B'Hoida Asa, by him believing her, he caused Sheta Asa Ishta Alam, that she can no longer live with him, they break up a marriage. The Oiver Al Chedim Takanos Abenigation. And he'll be over on a Takana Abenigation. What Takana? So according to Tosfos, it seems Abenigation made a Takana that you're not allowed to believe your wife in this case. In fact, by Yisrael as well, if a woman comes forward and she admits that she committed infidelity, the Bezin generally is going to say, we don't believe her. Obviously, she's true what it is, but we don't believe her. Not when it comes to your affecting somebody else, we think Shem and Nasna ain't a bach. Just get out of the marriage. Okay. Others say that not that Taisus, not Taisus, so much Taisus. Others are showing him say that the cheder negation that we don't force, that a husband cannot force a wife to leave, right? Rabbi Negation made a number of decrees. One of them is that even though technically according to the Torah, a husband can give a wife without her consent, but we don't want that anymore to happen, that a husband should just forcibly divorce his wife. It falls under that banner, and we're expanding it, even in the case where, according to Halach, he should be divorcing her, because if he believes her. But since the Mishnah said we shouldn't believe her, it's like he's forcing her. So it falls under the category of that cheder negation. But Taisus doesn't say that. Taisus seems to learn. So another cheder. In other words, Rabbi negation did not want to destroy families. You shouldn't make it easy. That's the whole idea. Can't force the wife to take a get. She has to consent, and same thing here. Okay. Anyway, in the big machlek is also what happens after, let's say for whatever reason, let's say the husband dies. Can she marry another kohen now? Because with this husband, we say we don't believe her, as we'll soon see about Truma. With his husband, we say we don't believe her, maybe she wants to marry somebody else. But now she never retracted. She maintains that this is what happened, and now that she's a free woman, so she has no longer an incentive to make up the story. What for? She's free anyway. So therefore, we'll believe her now, and she cannot marry a kohen, or not. Or what? Here's a machlek, the Rambam, the Ravid. What happened? She comes along afterwards, after her husband died. She says, "You know why I said this whole story? Because I want to get out of his marriage, of this terrible marriage." Do we believe her now? It's called a masla. She comes up with an excuse. The Rambam says we don't believe her. The Ravid says, "Of course we believe her." Okay. Very, you can see this is very complicated stuff and very complex. Okay, let's continue the Gemara. So what do we do? Number one is she has to bring evidence if she wants to get out of the marriage. Just bring 2 witnesses. What about Hashemayim Bein Mincha? Yasu Der Bar Kosher. We should make a request. What kind of request? All kinds of opinions what the Mishnah means. Some say, the Rishalmi says, the husband, it's the onus is on the husband to make a meal, make her feel good, and try to pacify her. She's claiming that he can't have relations, and he's obviously disagreeing with her. So maybe there's some shalom bias issues here. I mean, that's really what the nub of all this. So be nice to her, take her to a restaurant, and that's what Rishalmi says. Rashi says just the opposite. Rashi is the only one who says this. We ask the husband politely, you know what? Obviously, there's deep-seated problems there. Give her a divorce. Find another wife because it's not working out. Others say we tell her, daven to the Eibishter that he should be able to perform so you can have children. So Yevakish, interesting. Everyone has a different shot in what do you mean Yevakish? That's true. And the fourth opinion says we tell her, calm down, give your husband a chance, and maybe if you coax, if you're nicer to him, maybe you'll be able to have intimate relations and so on. 4 different opinions because you have 4 different Rishonim here. Just interesting. Everyone has their own idea of what does it mean. Okay, number 3 is she included him. He should be made for the chelkus between him and her, and they can have relations with him, but she's forbidden to everybody else. She's forbidden. Now, how was she forbidden to the husband in the first place? Because 2 ways of understanding Pshat. Did she say, I don't want my husband to have anything to do with me? Or did she say, I don't want to have anything to do with my husband? Because if she said, I don't have any relations with anybody else, how can she ask her husband? The Torah says, so some of the Rishonim say, because she also asked herself on the rest of the world, there's an Easter called Easter Koilu. If you remember, we learned about Isa Moise. About Isa Koil means since the Isa can land on the majority of the people, it also includes then the husband as well. Says the Gemara. You have a question. The husband to me. Can she continue eating truma? Because truma doesn't affect the relationship between him and her. But she's saying that I am a zayin. I'm not allowed to be married to you. Okay, we don't believe her as far as that is concerned. But do we say shavi nafshe chetir l'sun? Explains. Rav Sheisha says oicheles. Yes, she can continue eating. We don't believe her completely. And you know why? So take you because if she stops eating truma, people will say, why is she not eating truma? Because probably she's telling the truth, or that something happened, and therefore they'll allege that these children were born from they're all halalim, that they cannot serve as kohanim. Rabbi says, she does not eat. Why? Because it's not so obvious. She can eat something else. She can eat chulin. Nobody will notice if she eats truma or chulin, and therefore there won't be any laws on the children. So we believe her as far as is concerned. In fact, the Ran has another version here that really we never believe her. It was at the special takana at the beginning of the mission that we used to believe her in those days. We thought, something's not right in this whole marriage over here. So let's just believe her and get out. That was chatzchila. Till we realized that her motive was not because there's any problems with this marriage. Her motive was because she fell in love with somebody else. That's something else altogether. Amar Rav says, Rav Sheish is Maida. She even is Armala. Rav Sheish is Maida. But once she became a widow, then for sure she could no longer eat. There's no Meitzilaz on her children. Why not? Because people will say that maybe the din is that a wife of a kind can continue eating truma even after her husband died if she has children on account of her children. But if she lives with somebody that is forbidden for her, then she can no longer eat truma. So, or somebody forbidden that she can, as a married to a kohen, she no longer with a kohen. Then she no longer eat truma. So let her happen. So we no longer let her eat truma. People say, oh, she did something wrong, but doesn't cast any aspersions on the children because they're from the past. She'ena chelos medium time, and the whole reason is she takes a lot of banana. But we don't want her to make all kinds of allegations about the children. But this armel and this gashta, if she was the widow or divorced, I'm going to say hashta these things. So something happened now. Abra papa, not a papa. Very interesting. Bodiklan Rava once tested us. He teased. We had it a few times in Gemara. Bodiklan Rava asked the question, which is an obvious question, but he wanted to test. We were young children, and he wanted to see if we're smart enough to come up with an answer. This is the question he asked. Eishes koyin shenenza, the wife of a koyin who was raped. Yesh la ksuva, ein la ksuva. Does she have a ksuva or not? What's the shaila? Because the wife of a kohen who's raped has the same halacha like the wife of Yisrael who deliberately committed adultery. Because in both cases, they're not allowed with the husband anymore. And what happens by Yisrael, Yisrael, she forfeits a ksuva. So maybe by a kohen, the same thing should apply. That if she was raped, it's true, it's not her fault, she should forfeit a ksuva. Says the Gemara. This is what Rava said to the students. Since the law of a woman who was raped by a kohen is kiratza legabi Yisrael, is like a woman who deliberately committed adultery, that means the same thing. Ain't look ksuva. So therefore, just like over there, there's no ksuva here also. Perhaps matzi amrle, she can say anoh chazina. She said, look, if I would have been married to Yisrael, I could continue living the husband. So I'm not the problem. The problem is you. The Gabra who didn't stach for Sadeyu. The problem is you and your field got flooded.
Because you're a kohen.
You're a kohen, so you ruined it. You're too bad on you. That was a question Rav asked. And he wanted not just a svara, he wanted to bring me a proof. The Abaridalis, our papa didn't take credit that he said it. He said, we, collective we. We all answered him that Mishnah, this Mishnah right here. Because how do we know the Mishnah talking about the wife of a kohen? Maybe talking about the wife of Yisrael. She says, I'm coming. Yesh la ksuva. And the Mishnah says she has a ksuva. Now, Ma'askir, what are you talking about? We're talking about the wife of Yisrael. She's allowed to live with a husband if she was raped. There must be Iber Ratzah, must be willingly. If willingly, Yesh la ksuva, Yesh Yishai. Klum Yesh la ksuva, she has a ksuva, of course she forfeits it. The Iber, she was raped. Mi ka mitzvah gabra, she's forbidden to husband, she can continue living. The Ella must be talking about our Mishnah, Be'eches Kohen. And what does the Mishnah say? Iber she did deliberately again. Klum yesh l'ksuva makes sense. The wife of Yisrael, she forfeits a ksuva, and the wife of a Kohen doesn't. Nigara meishes Yisrael b'rotzah. Why is she any different than the wife of Yisrael? And the lav ba'onis, she was raped. Uktani, and it says yesh l'ksuva. She has a ksuva. So clearly, and that's how we answered Rabbi. Rabbi, this is exactly what Rabbi wanted to hear from us. He wanted us to come up with. He challenged us. He wanted us to come up with a raya, not stam in the Voltarim.
Give us Rabbi's response.
I'm sure he did. I'm sure he's proud of his students. Okay, tomorrow back to normal time.